going for something a bit different this time with my first ever crack at media analysis. And what a film to start with. Okay, so spoilers, obviously, for the entire plot of Music. In the first part, I offer my synopsis of the story, followed in the second part by a discussion of the fallout. I had so much more to say, but this video is already way too long, so I have linked some other reviews and resources down in the description. I might even do a lazy follow-up rant of the things I wanted to say but didn't have time to. Please consider yourself warned that this video contains discussions of restraints, violence, and Sia's tweets. Okay, deep breaths. For those of you who have been terminally offline the past few months, but also somehow watching me on YouTube, Music is the first film to be written, directed, and produced by Sia, the multi-award winning singer-songwriter. This is Music, played by Maddie Ziegler. The film opens with Music getting herself ready and struggling for an unspecified reason. Cut to the opening musical number, which involves strobe lights, contrasting colours, fast movements, and chaotic music. Apropos of nothing, autistic people are, on average, 4 times more likely to suffer from epilepsy. The lyrics allude to Music's frustration with her body. The choreography is questionable, and I'm sure you're already aware of the controversy over this aesthetic. Anyway, Music gets up and we see her morning routine. We meet her gran and carer, who at least seems genuinely invested in Music's happiness. Music then goes off for her morning walk, and we learn that there is a series of people who ensure that she gets to the library and back safely. Music goes to the library to look at a book about dogs, dogs being one of her special interests besides learning facts. And honestly, the weirdest TV show ever. Is that a real thing? Or let me know in the comments about that. I found out that it isn't a real thing, but it soon will be. Sia wants to make a kids' TV show and used Music to promote the idea, because this film is for and about her. On her way out, we get this kind of strange scene where she looks up at the sun and her face completely changes. It's as if the autism is drained from her. And this seems to be an introduction to how we're supposed to see Music as a normal, abled girl trapped under all that autism. The Autism Speaks were one of the groups consulted for this film. It's hardly a surprise that they're presenting autism as a dualistic thing, rather than intrinsic to Music's identity. While she's on her way home, her gran collapses dead and is found by Music and the kindly landlord, or at least I think he's the landlord. Anyway, he calls Music's sister and the real protagonist of the film, Zoo, played by Kate Hudson, short for Kazoo. Those weird names are later explained away due to their mother being a real junkie. Zoo is a proper little tearaway, and we know this because of her shaved head and quirky sense of dress. She's a recovering alcoholic drug dealer who is on probation for either stealing a TV or falling off the fire escape, or both. It's not really clear. Things not really being clear will be a running theme. For example, to me, Zoo looks to be in her late 30s, but I think she's supposed to be in her mid-20s, as she says she's twice Music's age, and they call Music a kid and a magical little girl. But like, Music's in no education, and it doesn't seem as if she's being taught anything at home except fun factoids off of popsicle sticks. Anyway, Zoo just wants to know if she'll inherit any money and plans to leave Music at a facility ASAP. The next morning, Music wakes up and is upset to learn that her morning routine is not as it should be. Zoo makes her eggs but fails to braid her hair, and this triggers the first of 2 meltdowns. Entering Ebo, a neighbour who had been a part of Music's morning walk coordination team and is a boxing instructor at a local gym. We later learn that Ebo is suffering from HIV and is struggling to get medication, and that his ex-wife is now marrying his brother. We also learn that he had an autistic younger brother back in Ghana who is dead now. as people in his village think special needs are a curse. I've seen people say that they think it's good that the film highlights that in many parts of the world, autism acceptance isn't even on the horizon. I think they could have done it differently, and as well as being potentially insensitive, it kind of implies that autistic people in the States are more or less accepted by society and not murdered, and that's just not the case. So in comes Ebo to teach Zoo how to restrain music by picking her up, almost slamming her down onto the ground, straddling her and pinning her arms above her head to, in his words, crush her with his love. I'll be talking more about this later. Anyway, music is fine then, as if nothing happened, and off she goes on her morning walk with Ebo and Zoo trailing behind her, completely ignoring her to flirt with one another. Next, we're introduced to Felix, and I have things to say about Felix, or tragic Billy Elliot as I call him. Felix is painted as music's only friend. He helps with her morning walk. We see him watching her in the library and often gazing longingly at her from a distance. There's also a scene where we see him shining a light into Music's bedroom to cheer her up on the night of her grand's death. We're led to believe they're friends, yet we never see them interact together, in the same room, not once. Nor do we ever hear Felix speak, yet it's unclear whether he is non-speaking like Music. The film progresses on with more flirting from Zoo and Ebo, with Music just there for background noise. Like she's literally framed in the background of most of the shots. Zoo is in awe of Ebo, apparently just for being a nice person, and Ebo likes Zoo because... Actually, that's not really so clear. Maybe he's just lonely. Zoo sells prescription drugs for the least threatening drug lord type I've ever seen on film. Her plan is to sell enough drugs to afford a move to Costa Rica to do a bit of settler colonialism. At one point, her client, a surprisingly placed Juliette Lewis, tells Zoo about a friend who is absolutely loaded and wants lots and lots of drugs, please. This client turns out to be Sia, and honestly, they should win prizes for most awkward cameo. Zoo's talking to her assistant about the drugs, and she just looks over her shoulder and is like, oh, is that a Sia wig? Anyway, Sia wants to buy a load of illegal pain meds to fly down to Haiti to treat kids who have been hurt in an earthquake. Pop stars without borders, she calls it. Doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, are you doing any quality control on those illicit drugs there, Sia? No. Hey, well, let's just trust this dude, shall we? Meanwhile, Ebo is having to turn to that dude for his meds, and Zoo is tasked with delivering them. And this is how she finds out about his HIV. They're on off for a bit, despite never really being on, and Zoo concentrates on making money. However, drama finally happens when Zoo loses her big bag of Pop Stars Without Borders drugs. When Music gets stung by a bee, and as Zoo doesn't realise that she had her EpiPen in her pouch the whole time, rushes her off to hospital, leaving her bag in the park. This causes Zoo to fall off the wagon. She gets drunk in the apartment, which frightens Music and leads her to wet the bed for the first time in years. Zoo shouts about Ebo's HIV in the apartment block halls, has one of the neighbours call the cops on her, and then goes out on a bender, culminating in her falling and smashing her face on the steps of the apartment. On that same night, Felix, who, after realising that Zoo isn't exactly there for Music, orders an emotional support dog for her because apparently you can order dogs for delivery in the States, and is then immediately killed by his abusive father when Felix tries to intervene to help his mother. The scene is horrific and by far the most dramatic thing to occur in the whole film, and it isn't mentioned again. There's not a single word of the script on the death of Music's only friend. It's not even clear to us that Music knows he's dead. Like, at one point you think she heard it all happen, But then the next you see her smiling at the flashing police lights, so you don't know. Anyway, getting a bloody nose is the wake-up call Zoo needed, and she starts in earnest to get clean and to look for work. However, it is a bit hard, so she gives up and takes Music off to a facility to leave her there. This isn't like the final 15 minutes of the film. All that sage advice from Ebo about Music being special, all the bonding montage. That's right, they literally montaged their bonding moments. But no amount of montages will change Zoo's mind about dumping her only family off with strangers. But while Zoo is unpacking Music's 2 tiny suitcases of possessions, Music tells her to stop it and sit down. Music then grabs hold of Zoo's necklace. It's a pendant she made as a kid. And I guess this reminds Zoo that Music is her sister or something. Anyway, that's all it takes for Zoo to change her mind, and we get this celebratory scene of them running out of the facility. I don't think they needed to run. It's not like they were escaping or anything, but run they did, like school was out for summer. Straight to Ebo, who was giving a speech at his brother's wedding. I guess Sue memorised the date, time and location of the wedding from that one time she saw the invite for a couple of seconds. You see, Zoo has now learned how to love, and she needs to tell Ebo that she's a good person too now, because she decided not to abandon her sister. And they hug, and it's magical, and it's the emotional climax of the film, and Music is literally in the background again. Zoo then decides that Ebo should play a song on the piano that just happens to be there, and as he begins to play, Music starts to sing. And this teaches Ebo's family that autistic people aren't cursed after all. Lessons learned all around. The closing scene is Ebo and Zoo playing Happy Families, making Music her 2 eggs, and the arrival of the dog Felix had ordered. The film ends with Music's assistive speech machine saying, "I am happy." Immediately after the trailer for Music was released in November last year, there was criticism from the autistic community about the casting and what this means for representation. And there was pushback from those supportive of Sia. So much was said, but one argument I saw quite a lot was that Music is about a non-speaking autistic girl. And those who do speak are wrong to make a fuss about how it doesn't represent them. It's not supposed to, they said, and you're attacking a film that those it does represent are unable to defend. So linked below are some Twitter threads, blog posts and articles by non or partially speaking autistic people telling us exactly what they think about Music. Also linked below is a short film which I urge you to go and watch straight away after this one, which is made by and with non and partially speaking autistic people. A film which friend of the community, Sia, actually promised to help fund, but then just didn't. So they funded it themselves and they set it to release on the same day as Music was released in the US, which is, So if you promise to go and watch that and click all those links down there, then I'll crack on with my thoughts. One of the first fears/assumptions that the community had on release of the trailer was that while Sia was calling this a love letter to the autism community and their carers, that this would be yet another example of disabled characters being used as a plot device for the redemption of the abled protagonist. Sia didn't help to quell these fears when in an interview she said that she wanted to make Rain Man the musical, but with girls, which incidentally isn't even really true. The film was originally intended to not be a musical, and the protagonist Zoo was originally intended to be played by a male actor. Apparently, Shia LaBeouf and Jonah Hill were favourites for the role. Being dishonest about her intention seems to be a bit of a thing with our Sia, as we'll soon see. The plot is about Zoo, her overcoming addiction and her love story with Ebo. And aside from Music being the reason they met, that reason being Music having a meltdown and Ebo coming in to restrain her, Music doesn't really play much of a part in their relationship. They seem to pretty immediately click and then spend the rest of the film having the least intense courting period I've ever seen. In fact, the climactic scenes at Ebo's brother's wedding and then back at the apartment, which I guess Ebo is now paying for. Anyway, in both of those scenes, music is still framed as just hanging out at the edges, just like being happy for Zoo. I will say that music singing at the end is one of the things I really liked about the film. It was the one moment where it seemed like we were really seeing her. I just wish it wasn't framed as like her and Zoo teaching Ebo's family a lesson about acceptance. And still, even when music is singing, we still see more of Zoo's reaction to it. Her realising again that there's a person in there somewhere. This film could have been about a young autistic woman coping with the loss of two of the most important people in her life. First, her gran, the woman who spent every single day looking after her, getting to know her, who loved her. Later, music loses her only friend, Felix, which, as I said, is basically ignored in the script apart from this music video, which seems to allude to music saying goodbye to him and her gran. What? Oh no! But we don't get to see her coping with these losses or even reacting to them much at all. We do see her get upset, however, at the absence of what these people did for her. It's almost as if we're supposed to think that she felt no grief, but was only upset that her hair went unbraided. This leans quite strongly into the autistic people have no empathy myth, which has been used for decades to dehumanize and harm us. Another thing which objectifies music is just how little she's on screen. She goes to the library every morning and she has a favourite TV show which she watches every evening. But apart from that's all we really know about her day. As I said, she's not in any clubs or groups or education of any form. It's just left unsaid. I can't stress enough how little characterization music has. This could be because music isn't about music at all. It's about music, specifically Sia's. My initial thoughts after watching the film for the first time was that was the longest advert for an album I've ever seen. I wouldn't even consider it to be a proper musical. Like, I'm no Lindsay Ellis here, but my hot take on songs in musicals is that they're somehow a part of the narrative. But like, they're just Sia songs. They are catchy summer hits. The lyrics bear a very passing significance to the plot at best. And when I say they're wedged in, like I audibly sighed every time a serious scene is just dashed in half by plastic rainbow chaos. I found that these music videos, and you'll notice I keep calling them music videos and not musical segments or whatever, because that's what they are. They're promotional music videos made on a film studio's budget. And they killed dead any tension that the movie actually managed to muster. Viewers may find it interesting to learn that the decision to add music increased the studio's budget from $4 to $16 million. Just an unrelated little tidbit there for you. These music videos are supposed to be music's inner world. What's going on in her imagination at the time. And in them, she's Maddie Ziegler pulling faces. She's a dancer, able, agile, graceful, no longer so autistic. But it's not just music's inner world which is visualised by way of Sia songs. The other characters also seem to do this. So it's really difficult to see how these parts of the film are anything other than shameless promotion for Sia's musical career. Sia trying to do autism advocacy, trying to make an issue film and failing, that's one thing. Sia creating a platform to showcase her own career and calling it autism advocacy, well, that's a significantly higher level of yikes. Speaking of yikes. It would have been nice to be able to assess music based on its merits or lack thereof as a film, but unfortunately we can't properly discuss the impact this film has had on the autism community without discussing Sia herself. Because literally making a film that was about promoting her own career was not the only way that Sia ensured that she will never, ever be able to death of the author her way out of this one. Now, I don't like that colour. Sorry guys, this is going to be like the thing for the next few videos until the novelty of this wears off. Sia's responses to the criticisms of the trailer are fairly well documented at this point. She swore, she lashed out, she exposed small accounts to her millions of fans, and ultimately just fanned flames all around. Her threads soon became full of ableist language and slurs, of people strawmanning the position of autistic critics, hundreds attacking vulnerable, hurting people for bullying their favourite millionaire pop star. That feeling when you're tweeting the arsehole at autistic people to stop bullying. There were hundreds of "it's called acting" comments. Accusations of autistic people trying to gatekeep creativity, and an outpouring of support for Sia, including hashtags and fan-made videos. My favourite were the people who were all like, "Hate is gonna hate, babe." As if the criticisms weren't highly specific. Anyway, I think all this was described pretty well in this article by an autistic writer. What's being treated as autistic people attempting to dictate the terms by which anyone can tell a story about autism is actually more a desperate attempt to get to participate in the conversation at all. What irked me the most was that Sia could see all of this. She was liking tweets from her fan accounts, and not once was she like, "Oh, hey lovers, maybe chill." My Australian accent, absolutely perfect. So strong was the assumption that this was just a Twitter mob, mindless hate for the sake of hating. The Wikipedia page at the time also brushed over these criticisms, choosing to cite a spiked article, which was exactly what you would expect, all about Twitter mobs and cancel culture run amok. Listen, Sia love. If the community you're supposedly writing love letters to are using your name as a content warning, I think it's fair to say you're not doing the best job. But not only did Sia lean into culture war rhetoric and allow for autistic people to be insulted in her threats, she also doubled the heck down with what appeared to be a load of lies trying to justify her position. She said at one point that she tried to cast a non-speaking autistic girl, but that it was too stressful for the actress, and so Sia decided to cast Maddie instead. But then at another point she said that she had tried to cast several autistic actors for the role, but due to time restraints on the shoot, she was told to cast Maddie instead. And years ago, before production even began, she said that she wrote the role for Maddie. Even if we're at our most generous and we believe that she did try to cast an autistic actor, her not making her set accessible to them, that's a big old you problem, Sia. There are hundreds of autistic actors out there who are very much used to dealing with high-pressure film sets. But what would be the difference between someone like me, diagnosed with ASD1, playing a character with much higher care needs, and a neurotypical actor doing the same thing? Well, an autistic actress can draw from her own experiences to inform her portrayal. This would create a much more believable character. Less time would need to be spent on looking autistic, and more time could be spent on looking like a real person with depths and desires and an inner world that isn't exclusively Sia content. Those are artistic reasons. But apart from that, autistic actors need those opportunities. Just as with any on-screen depiction of a minority, actors from that community deserve the chance to portray their own group. As well as allegedly making stuff up about the casting, Sia also claimed that she had no idea how controversial Autism Speaks are, despite tweets from earlier in the year proving that to be a lie. Sia also claimed that she had done years of research for the film and had consulted several autism charities. However, from what she said in one of her interviews, it seems that this consultation involved sending the completed film off to 1 or 2 autism charities to be rated for accuracy. Like, was she gonna reshoot the whole thing if they gave her a bad score? Sounds like a box ticking exercise to me. From what I can tell, Sia used Autism Speaks and the Child Mind Institute for this consultation, both of which promote ABA treatments for autism and engage in very outdated rhetoric about autistic people. Years of research though. Pure autism research doesn't turn up that 1. Rain Man is considered the literal poster child of bad representation. 2. Autism Speaks is like the most controversial group you could have picked. 3. That functioning labels aren't used anymore, Sia. 4. That the disabled community don't need you to call them specially or magically or unusually abled or whatever other way of not talking about disability you can think of. And 5. That prone restraints are deadly. Tragically, it took the mother of somebody who was killed by these restraints to write to Sia with her story before Sia would admit that she had royally messed up, apologised and deleted her Twitter account. Before doing so, she said that future copies of the film would remove the restraint scenes and would add a content warning at the beginning. There was no warning on the version I watched, and honestly, I'm struggling to see how she could just remove those scenes. One is the inciting incident for Zhu meeting and falling in love with Ebo. Both times Music has a meltdown, she is restrained. If they just cut off the scene before she's restrained, I think it would mess with the continuity of the film. Like, Music has a meltdown and cut, who cares? Those restraint scenes aren't just unimportant scenes that have nothing to do with the plot. They're integral to it, which, by the way, shows that Sia's proposed warning that the film does not in any way condone the use of restraints to be an utter load of tosh. Restraints are absolutely painted to be a good and normal way to cope with meltdowns. In fact, they're the only way the characters respond to Music's meltdowns. And not only this, but after being restrained, Music bounces back, happy as Larry. Anybody who's experienced an autistic meltdown will tell you how unbelievably exhausting they are. I honestly can't say that anything about the portrayal of meltdowns in this film is anything but harmful. If this film was ever supposed to be about autism awareness, it failed catastrophically. But like I said, I don't think it was ever supposed to be that. Do indulge me in a spot of speculation, if you will, but I do have my suspicions about Sia's intentions. Shocker, I know. I've already talked about how Sia centres her own career in a way that kind of detracts from the plot, but I also suspect that Sia wrote a lot of herself into the character of Zhu. My impression after watching Music a few times for this video is that the film Sia always wanted to make deep down was of somebody overcoming addiction and depression by finding their voice and making something of their musical talent. But then she also wanted to launch Maddie's acting career, and what better way to do that with a bit of good old-fashioned Oscar bait? That's why I think Music's character feels like such an afterthought. At one point, while Zhu is attending her AA meetings, we get this edited-in voiceover of Sia talking about overcoming addiction. And one of the final thanks of the film is Sia thanking her AA group for saving her life. I think Sia could have made a really interesting film about overcoming addiction and finding stability and love and music. She didn't need to co-opt the autism acceptance movement to tell her own story. to center her own music and to showcase her friends. And that makes it so much worse that she did, and she did it in a way that is actively harmful. I actually wish there was more to say about music's character and the portrayal of autism in the film. There's mentions of her routine, her need for structure, some of her special interests, but unfortunately it's all done in such a superficial way that really bears no relevance to the actual plot. All in all, I'd say it's a bad film. Surprise! It feels vague and hollow, without the character development you really need in a film like this. It's a stretch to call it a musical. The songs are jarring and tedious all at the same time. And the portrayal of autism is at best shallow and at worst dangerous. I hope you enjoyed my first ever attempt at media review stuff. I've got a lot extra things going on, big light, and like there's a lot to set up. I hope I pulled it off. If you did like it, let me know by doing a like, or even better, a subscribe. I've exciting things planned for next month, as April 2nd is International Autism Awareness Day. Toot! I'd really like it if I could keep doing this YouTube thing, and if you agree, then head on over to Patreon where you can give me money so that I can do that. And also you get to hang out with the coolest people on earth who are already there. Here are their names. Don't you want to be part of that club? I know I do, but that would defeat the purpose. Look at them. Even their names are cool. It's thanks to them that I'm able to mess around with coloured lights. That's the only reason I'm here on YouTube. So yeah, cool, okay. Thank you for watching. Follow me on things.